Gnocchi alla Romana is Italian comfort food at its best. Made with semolina flour and milk, they're quite different than your typical potato gnocchi. But they're much easier to make and possibly even more delicious because they're cheesy on top, soft and custardy in the middle, and super crispy on the bottom. The first step is making something very similar to polenta. So place a large pot on low heat and pour in 4 cups of whole milk. Then add 4 tablespoons of butter. While you wait for the butter to melt, we can prepare the other ingredients, which will include 3/4 cup of Pecorino Romano cheese. You could use Parmesan instead, but I think this is a good recipe for Pecorino because it's a little bit stronger and will help flavor all the flour and milk. We also need 2 egg yolks, so crack each egg over a bowl and toss the yolk back and forth between the shells, using the side of the shells to break off the whites. Then add each yolk to a separate bowl, and save the whites for a healthy breakfast. Once the butter is melted, stir in 1 teaspoon of salt and about 1/8 teaspoon of freshly grated nutmeg. After the milk is hot and steamy but not quite simmering, you can begin adding 1 cup of semolina flour in a few stages so it doesn't clump up. So pour about 1/3 cup at a time and stir quickly with a wooden spoon. At first, it will still be fairly liquidy, and in the matter of seconds, it will become very thick. Continue to shake in the next additions of flour and keep stirring. As you add the last 1/3 cup, it will get more difficult to stir, but that's supposed to happen and will be a good arm exercise. You can add a few more tablespoons of milk if needed to make it slightly less stiff and easier to stir like I did here. Now just continue to mix for about 5 minutes until you get a dough-like consistency and the flour is cooked. Take it off the heat before dropping in the 2 egg yolks. It's important to stir quickly so you don't get any scrambled eggs. Finally, add the 3/4 cup of Romano cheese and give it one last mix. At this point, it would be a good idea for a taste test, but it should be fairly well seasoned between the salt and cheese. In a medium-sized baking sheet lined with plastic wrap, dump the entire pot of gnocchi dough into the center. With a rubber spatula, begin flattening it into an even layer. Once it's most of the way spread out, you can top with a second sheet of plastic wrap to make it smooth and completely even. I used this handy pie crust roller, but you could use a normal rolling pin or even a wine bottle, although it doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to mostly fill out the tray and to be about 1/4 inch thick. Then place it in the fridge for about 30 minutes to completely cool down so it can firm up and become easier to cut. In the meantime, start melting 1.5 tablespoons of butter in a small pan on medium-low heat. Throw in a few sage leaves to make a delicious brown butter. Stir it around for a few minutes or until it starts to turn a light brown color like this, and then remove it from the heat right away. Then coat a large cast iron skillet in a little bit of olive oil to prevent sticking, or you can bake them in a regular large baking dish. And now's a good time to preheat your oven to 425 degrees. Once the dough is chilled, remove it from the fridge and we'll start cutting it into discs about 3 inches across. To make things easy, you can use a cookie cutter, or you can use a tall and thin glass like I am here. Dip it in some water before cutting. Press down and twist, and a nice circle should come right out. Gently remove it from the cutter and place in the pan. Then continue forming the gnocchi. You want to slightly overlap each one over the one before it, going around the edges of the pan. Once there's no room for any more discs, fold the dough back together and then flatten it out again to the same size thickness to cut the final gnocchi, and fill the center of the pan. Now brush on all of the brown butter over the top. Then evenly grate another pinch of nutmeg and crack over some freshly ground black pepper. Finish by adding a nice dusting or about 1/3 cup of Parmesan cheese. You could also add more Pecorino here, but the Parmesan melts slightly better and gets a more golden brown color. Place the pan in the center of the oven for 25 minutes. If it's not totally golden brown on top after the 25-minute mark, you can put the oven on a low broil for 2 to 3 extra minutes, but make sure to keep a close eye on it. Take it out of the oven and let it cool slightly before enjoying. And of course top with some extra grated cheese. These could easily be served as a first course or would be a great side dish along some meatballs and tomato sauce or any other braised meat. You can find the full recipe in the description below, and please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching.